So I'm just going to very quickly introduce the session. I'm very sorry for the long delay. We'll try to catch up. But I say the vast majority of urban residents rely on informal or formal FSM services from the private sector. They don't always, most of them don't go to the public sector. Today our presenters will be talking about how they're supporting the private sector and establishing businesses in fecal such management, and how they're creating partnerships with the public sector, with sanitation authorities to better deliver these services. The first presentation is from Nick Alcock, but he can't make it, so Dave Wilson will be presenting instead. Dave is an engineer with Eden Municipality in Durban South. He's a senior manager for Wastewater Network and has 35 experience in wastewater management. So, 12 minutes. We'll try to do 12-minute sessions and with some questions afterwards. Please don't forget to write your 3 points from the session of what stood out to you.
Okay. Good morning. Unfortunately, I had the unlucky job having to present Hector Bush is very sick. I'm trying to get down, but I went back up here. My name is Dave Wilson. I'm with Hector, as George told us. We're entering into a urine diversion removal process, which I'm going to talk about in a business partnership. Technical and financial support that we received the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Department of National Development. City partnerships for urban sanitation services delivery. We had 2 phases. Phase 1 was the planning, which was completed. We went into phase 2. We were granted to phase 2, and that is now starting to roll out. Project Great Municipality is excellent. Very proud of our World Cup Stadium on the right-hand side. It's the second largest industrial hub. It's the fastest growing urban area in South Africa. It's a major tourist destination, and it also has South Africa's largest port. So it's quite a major city. I'd say it's perhaps either second or third major city in South Africa. The population of eThekwini is about 2.7 million. The urban population is 2 million, and the rural population is 1.7 million. There's 27 treatment works. In addition to that, we have about 8,000 kilometers of sewer networks, networks, about 600 kilometers of trunk sewers, and we have about 290 sewage pump stations. So it's a fairly large city. There are over 80,000 new leaf toilets installed for the rural areas, and eThekwini Council made a decision at the end of last year that we would empty all UD toilets free of charge every 2 years. And we'd have to provide a safe and economic way. Problem statement was that the fecal degradation and pathogen die-off is not what we thought it would be. We always thought that it would die off in 1 or 2 years. It was buried in the ground. We have found that it's not dying off, and sometimes even as far as 13 years later, the still is discarding the soil around it. So it's a high-risk household because it was originally envisaged that if we built a UD toilet, the house owner himself, after pathogen die-off, would then empty this toilet into the vault himself and move to a second vault. We then empty that and bury it on site, so that's not happening. And there's also service level inconsistencies in as much as that the council quite a while back approved that we would empty all the VIPs free of charge every 5 years. So the people that own UD toilets felt very unfair that they had to empty their own toilets and the person down the road is getting these empty for nothing. So that was a bit of some of the actual problem statement that we had, or problem that we deal with. Key challenges: health and environment, compliance, transport costs. We have to identify some beneficial use for fecal waste. We want to go dump it. We do take it to hazardous full sites, we don't just dump it in the rivers, etc. It's very expensive. So we didn't want to go that route. We have to meet the expectations of the communities, what they want to do, how they, so we have a lot of interaction with them to discuss whether they want to be part and parcel of the process, etc. And to identify opportunities for participation of the private sector and the residents. So the residents working in the area would like to become part and parcel of the entry program. And the sustainability of local business entities. So that we'll talk about that just now. This is the black soil and fecal waste cycling process. There's two scenarios. The top, unfortunately, we couldn't put the whole post on one slide, so we had to split it off. The top, first one is scenario one, where you actually, from the back of the vault, that's the back of the UD vaults, there's two vaults. You use one vault, second vault, and then it stays closed. When this becomes full, you move across the toilet, you move across that vault, then you keep biodegrades, and while using this, you can into this one. Scenario one is that you take it to site, you bury it on site, and you plant trees around it. That is in very rural areas where it's transport becomes too much to actually transport it. Scenario two is the second scenario where you take it out of the toilets into these rooms. Then it's taken by transport to a bioconversion using the lobby, which is the black salt supply lobby. This is the lobby is bred with special breeding tanks for the actual flies into the lobby. The lobby are brought to around about 9 days old and then introduced into the sludge. And then they convert that sludge into various things. That's a lot of processing. Basically, you get oil and you get protein that comes out, which goes to livestock feed. You also get a soil residue, which is a reasonable soil conditioner. It's not fertilizer, but it does have some nutrients in it. Then that protein gets processed and takes extended to livestock feed, mainly chickens and fish. They don't do beef, so or any cattle or any little pigs, but only for chicken and fish feed. And then the oils goes into industry, and the residue from the soil goes into our emerging farms, the community farms that we have. That's the basic process. That's what a breeding fly tank looks like. So these are all the flies inside these nets. They put in some nasty rubbish in the bottom there. The black soldier fly lays its heads above the sludge. It doesn't ever lay eggs on top of the sludge like other flies do. He lays it above the sludge into little plastic holders, and those are supposed to then fall out onto the sludge. They remove the plastic holders before they do that, and they process the eggs and get the flies. That's the lobby. Those are the trays. They can actually walk out of the actual lobby beds. Once they've fallen, they want to now go to the next stage of cocoons, and they actually climb up this wood climb and drop in the tray. That's what they look like when they're very white. Sometimes if they go black or brown, then it's okay, the phase one activities that we did with the EGF processing program was we did an institutional analysis, see whether integrating was right to do the process, was capable of actually handling a project like this. We looked at the environmental health and supply study, health and safety. Concept testing, would it work, can it work? We did the business model for UD waste removal, so the business model for processing of the waste. We did procurement, contract options we could do, what waste contract come up with. Policy development, develop policy about the whole process, and also contract support framework. So we went with our minor contractors. The business modeling for the UD sludge removal part of it, we went, which was modeling was exercise. Modeling exercise to estimate cost for scenarios 1 and 2. Scenarios, one to bury on site, the second one to take it to the process plant. We did assumptions. We assumed a number of UD toilets. Although we think we know how many out there, it's not quite what we think. I think we'll get more of an understanding after we've done this empty process for the first time, and we'll have a more better idea what numbers are out there. Sludge volumes in the inventory in the UD toilet vary between 0.6 and 0.8 cubic meters. That's on average. So we assumed that. We assumed labour requirements and costs. We did some trials on site. We actually went out there, we emptied some toilets, took out a set, checked out what we took, we did some costs and estimates. Travel and transportation requirements. We looked at how far we had to travel. We did service. We had some assistance from a few people. One of us sitting in the audience here that helped us with some of that stuff. Supervision and overheads, what that would cost us. and the cost associated with disposal of variable tree contents like all processing. That was what we did for our project. Okay, then the modeling for the black soldier fly processing plant, the PSF identification, we looked at that as being the suitable processing technology. We looked at other stuff, but that was the most suitable. And also because we had already engaged with the company actually doing this before, about a year before, so we looked at that. We then went back there, we actually engaged with them again. We then went and looked for a pilot plant site, which was in the Tekwini, found one, which is the Sapinga Works, which has got a lot of empty ground and a lot of drying bed tanks that we're going to convert. And that's where the infrastructure options came up. These things we can do tunnels, etc. The business modelling we did based on two scenarios, one for 10 tons, one for 20 tons, to see which would be the most viable. Because although it's 10 tons, it's 10 tons of fecal sludge, there's also an additional 10 tons of vegetable sludge and vegetable waste that comes out of kitchens. You have to mix the two together, you can't just do fecal sludge, otherwise you don't actually get your larvae doesn't grow fast enough. So you have to put in the sugars, etc., from vegetable waste. The business feasibility study, you look to see what is viable. With the Tekwini in South Africa, the government, you're allowed to do a 3-year contract. If you go over 3-year contracts, you then have to apply to National Treasury. They don't allow you to go over 3 years, so we have to look at the options whether 3 or 5 years is better. We've come up with the option of the 5 years is a better scenario. It's, you can invest more money into it. The specialists that came in, they happy to do 5 years because then they can put some of their funding into it as well, and it gives them time for return on funds, return on investment. Alright, let's go through quickly. Select the procurement options. Basically, we have a municipal gate fee, just quickly. Municipal gate fee of 350 Rand a tonne. We agreed on that up front to go to the BSF plant. That whole finance process there, that process is going to be ring-fenced. The feed market that comes in, okay, that's the sales from the process. After the profit operating cost, the profit cost will be split between the municipality and BSF. We decided on 50% each, 50% split. If that gate fee reduces from 350 Rand a tonne down to 0, so we have no cost to the council to actually process our sludge, then the profit will more than likely become 100% to the actual to the BSF plant operator. You say it's done. That's all. Thank you.
If you monitor the pathogens throughout the process and at the end of the residue that you're using.
Challenging to identify opportunities for the private sector. I was wondering if you also had maybe challenges in involving the municipality, the local government in this.
Right. Yes, first question. Yes, we've done extensive tests have been done by the University of Stellenbosch, by a private laboratory in Cape Town, and also the University of KwaZulu-Natal involved. They are checking various things. They're checking pathogen residue in the larvae. They're also feeding chickens with the larvae. They're testing the meat, the flesh of the larvae before, after. They're bringing tasting people to see if there's any taste that changes within the chicken. There's extensive testing has been done, so it is being done. Yeah. That answers the question. Second question. Yes, there's always challenges with the municipality. Yeah, we're going to call it red tape. I don't know what you want to call it, but yes, there's a lot of challenges with the municipality. However, there are ways around it. There are what we would call in South Africa a Section 36 process, which means that you don't have to go through the normal routes to procure contractors and put out various work. However, it is a process that you have to go through. It does have to be approved by a committee. It does have to be approved by municipal management. etc., and it's got to go through council. So we have to go the route anyhow, but we can cut short all the tender documents and tendering because we want to go for a specific process. That's about the only challenge that we do have within the municipality.
Anthony Kilbride, Haiti. Thank you very much for the presentation. I was actually lucky enough to visit some of this UDTs in Esquini back in 2012, and I was accompanied by your colleague Terry Garnton. It was very interesting. I was very impressed by the UDTs. They were very nice design. I can remember especially the ventilation pipe with a little hat to stop the rain falling in. I can remember there was a nice slope to facilitate the removal of the waste and emptying. But after this big operation that you had to empty, I was wondering what are the findings and what are the changes and modifications that you've made to your design based on this big operation experience. Is that clear?
That's good. Yeah, we are only starting to empty now. Okay, so it was only approved at the end of last year. When I get back, we will then be putting the contract out to actually start emptying. So we haven't started emptying yet. We've done trials. The changes to the UD toilet are purely cosmetic. The backsliding gates were a bit flimsy and those started to break off, so we've come up with a new model for that. We fix it permanently because we're going to be emptying and not the homeowner. So we didn't want to make it easy for him. Before we wanted to make it easy so you could slide it open and close. Now we're going to fix it so no one can get access to that. So the cosmetic things are changing. Because we are emptying it now, it's going to be a 2-year cycle. It's not going to be any more the case of that they use sand to put on top of the fecal sludge. They just simply use the tank and we will empty it every 2 years. So really true, that's the only change at all. We've changed the door slightly because the hinges went wrong, but it's just cosmetic stuff. The basic function of the UD toilet remains exactly the same.
Thank you very much, Dave. Sorry, if you have any questions, please talk to Dave maybe afterwards. Thank you very much. Go on to the next presentation from Peter Hawkins. Peter is a WSP team lead in Mozambique. He's a member of the also WSP urban sanitation team and almost 40 years of experience in the business. He first started looking at emptying in the 1970s. A few decades ago.
Yeah, in fact, I was hoping that my colleague Odette Mashuko would be able to present this, but for measures beyond my control, she wasn't able to come. But we've been working on this together. So, certainly in Maputo, as in so many other cities, fecal sludge management is a major challenge. We have less than 10% on sewerage, which is very typical in Africa. And also, as we heard earlier, it's the informal sector which basically looks after this. The city council has, I think, one vacuum tanker which is very old and operates occasionally, and usually with schools and clinics and so on. We were approached about 3 or 4 years ago by the Association of Micro Enterprises which are providing solid waste collection services in the peri-urban parts of Maputo. And they weren't getting enough money for that, they were looking for other opportunities, and we said, well, how about sludge? And they said, okay, let's give it a go. And in the sort of slow way that the World Bank works, we eventually managed to mobilize some funds. And since about April, we've been working with about 8 of these micro-operators in one of the municipal districts to look at different models for providing fecal sludge management services in the peri-urban communities. Because up till now, typically this has been done by the informal sector, very unhygienic manual emptying methods with buckets and feces either being, the sludge either being buried or dumped into ditches and even open land. Just to give you an idea what the setup is in Maputo, you can see that a little more than half of the systems are water-based, and then we have some improved latrines and some other unimproved latrines. The study area is one of the kind of inner-city slum districts, but actually the setup is pretty similar there. There's a bit more in terms of the water-based systems because these are well-established communities, they've been investing over the years, and there's also a slightly greater amount of very poor quality traditional latrines because these are basically poor people and some of them can't afford to make decent facilities. We also looked at the intervals for emptying over the city, and as you can see, it's somewhere between, say, 1 and 5 years, maybe 2 to 3 years is the average. Just to give us an idea of what the demand might be. As I say, the pilot contains 3 elements. As well as looking at fecal sludge management, we're also looking at improving toilets, particularly in some of the low-cost rental housing, and also monitoring, because quite honestly we don't know what's going on. It's one of the 7 municipal districts that make up Maputo. It's totally unplanned. It has about 140,000 people living there. So we were looking at ways of developing viable businesses to do fecal sludge management in a more hygienic manner. So we working with the Operators Association, they decided sort of amongst themselves competitively who could sort of make the best pitch for doing this. And then we've been working with them, training them up, providing some basic equipment to get them going, and doing a bit of hand-holding. Of course, with all urban sanitation, you've got all kinds of stakeholders. The main ones are here. WSP, which is us, have been financing WhatsApp, to which George, do you not belong to them, or are you just a consultant for them? Anyway, who've actually been sort of channeling the funds. We've been working with the Micro Enterprises Association, as I said, and obviously with the Municipal Council, who are responsible for sanitation. We initially were concentrating on latrines because we didn't actually have the information which I gave you a couple of slides back, giving the breakdown of sanitation facilities, and we thought there were more latrines and less septic tanks and water-based systems. And so we focused on putting together a kit of equipment, which I've tried to represent sort of pictorially there. Basically, the gulper, which I think some of you know, which is a kind of a hand pump, buckets as well, because we're very thick sludge, there's sometimes no alternative, and then a mechanical trash pump, petrol powered. And the idea was that you would then use some of this equipment to empty it out into a 500-litre tank on a handcart, take that to a transfer station, and from there would go off to the treatment works. And for the septic tanks, where the volumes were a bit greater and the sludge is much lighter, these were going to be pumped out, and the cheapest option we found was 2,000-litre plastic water tank mounted on a pickup truck, which many of the operators already had. However, very quickly we found out that the 500-litre handcart was not suitable for various reasons. Partly because the access roads are very bumpy in those areas, they're very hard, very difficult to push around. Secondly, because 500 litres is not very much, even for the latrines. We're finding people want to have 1 or 2 cubic meters taken out, so it meant a lot of backwards and forwards. And also, in fact, using the trash pump, we find there's often 200 or 300 litres of sludge actually in the outlet pipe if it's any distance away. So as soon as it starts coming out of the end, you more or less have to stop and then drain out the things. So it was very labour intensive. Second thing was that although we had full cooperation from the municipality on the development of transfer stations, and they granted us sites and everything, local residents did not like shit in the backyard, and effectively that was stopped. So we tried again, and to overcome those problems which I mentioned, we replaced the transfer stations with trailers, tanker trailers, which are pulled down to the treatment works by a municipal tractor, which And the other thing which has happened is that the operators now are kind of clubbing together to use this tanker. It demands a bit more coordination, but they're good businessmen. They've sorted it out how to do that. And so you'll have that tank, or maybe one of these truck-mounted tanks parked somewhere where they've combined that they're going to work together. Just to give you an idea of the gear that I'm talking about, pretty straightforward stuff. Things have started slowly. We've only got up to about 30 MTs a month, but word is still spreading around. Some by word of mouth, but the providers themselves have been doing a bit of publicity, and that seems to be quite effective. As I said before, we kind of made a mistake in designing the service to start with. We didn't really know what we were trying to enter. Now we do. We have difficult access in about a quarter of the plots. So, you know, these are places where you can't take a vehicle and you need to carry things out manually or pump it out down a tube. And indeed, the trash pump has been very widely used. Also partly because, as I said, the number of pit latrines being emptied was rather few. Generally, a crew of 3 has been found to be economical, and what the operators have done initially, they started by taking these people on as staff, but have now moved to a system whereby they have a kind of pool of people that are trained and they work with. When they have a job, they do piecework. I mean, this kind of thing is pretty normal in these low-income communities where people generally live on a daily rather than a monthly paid basis. A lot of people work on our jobs, so this is perfectly satisfactory. Cost per emptying around $75, which is quite expensive. It is about 3 times what the very unhygienic manual emptiers are charging, and that is definitely an issue which we need to look at. We asked people why they liked it, if they used it, and people are very aware of how yucky the manual process is, and they're very happy to have something new and better. There are still some issues about the equipment that we're using, but this is clear there's an aspiration there. Possibly something that people will be happy to pay a little bit more for. So we need to do some more work on making that equipment more hygienic and more kind of modern looking, more prestigious. We asked people who use the services why, and half of them said they were just trying it out, but they were kind of hoping that it was going to be a good service. For people who asked about it and then didn't use it, the overwhelming issue was price. As I say, we need to look at that. I think probably we're going to need to look at partial subsidies. There's a bit of subsidy built into the system already through the use of the municipal tractor, which they don't pay for. But some of the operators, if they're using their own trucks, then of course people do pay for that. So that's that first point there. Even the fees that they're charging, we find it a little difficult to get the operators to report truthfully on what they're earning. But we think probably it falls a little bit short of full capital recovery. I've also mentioned the fact that there are many more septic tanks involved, not only because there are actually more there than we thought, but also because those using latrines tend to be the poorest and those are the ones who are not able to pay the prices. Again, as I mentioned with the hand carts, this has proved very difficult and we're moving away from that. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for a nice presentation, Peter. So my name is Arjun Shaikh. I'm working for WUSA Bangladesh. So I I saw in your presentation that in a sludge management chain, there is a huge challenge on disposal and treatment. But in addition, as you mentioned, where these poor slum people, they're using the traditional toilets and the pit latrines. So the challenge is, I think there is huge challenge in collection because a lot of solid waste and papers in the septic tank or in the pit latrine. So what is your the best solution for the collection of this sludge? And what is your recommendation? Because we are facing the same challenge in slum areas also.
Thank you very much for the presentation. My question has to do with the tanker which replaces the transfer station. You said the operators jointly manage the tanker operation. I'm not quite clear what exactly you mean by that. And then the procurement of that tanker, is it by or is financed through the project? And then also the study area. What is the size of the study area in relation to the entire city of Maputo? Thank you.
Thank you for your good presentation. As I understood it, that you were covering about 140,000 population. And you also mentioned that 90% of the toilets are on-site. So one confusion I have that whether you first went for a business plan and what was your investment cost? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The gentleman here is talking about solid waste in the sludge. Yeah, I agree. It's a huge issue. And if we can keep the solid waste out of the sludge, it just makes everything so much easier and cheaper. We are, to some extent, blessed in Maputo in that the population generally are washers rather than wipers. So at least we're not having toilet paper things going in. Which in other places, I remember in Botswana, for instance, doing pit emptying there, you often find a kind of a mat of consolidated paper over the sludge, which is a real pain to deal with. But yes, obviously people do throw solid waste in. I think another interesting thing, comparing with, for instance, in Lusaka, where very similar services are being developed in a neighbouring country, there's a lot more solid waste there, and I think partly that's to do with the fact that we have quite a good peri-urban solid waste collection system being operated by these same people. And, well, you know, if they find solid waste, they'll tell the guys, look, you know, we come and collect this every day, so what are you doing putting it in the toilet? But that said, there is still a significant amount, and, you know, at the beginning we devised various kind of hooks and rakes and things for fishing it out, and then you have to kind of bag it up and put it into the solid waste stream, basically. It's a bit mucky and a bit messy. I think, I mean, I'm interested in, for instance, what they've been doing in eThekwini, in Durban in South Africa, where they've decided to move towards pore flush water seal units precisely to avoid the ingress of solid waste. I mean, in Bangladesh, where pore flush is more or less the norm, I would definitely move in that direction. I hope that addresses your question. Tony, yes, how does the joining up for the use of the traders work? I went through quickly, so I didn't perhaps explain everything. The initial idea was that we had kind of two sorts of contractors, the ones who were doing the whole chain down to the treatment works, and then ones who were just going to do primary emptying up to the transfer station. The idea was that, you know, the poorer, smaller micro enterprises could get a foothold in the business. The way it's now panned out is that the bigger operators have kind of bossed it a little bit. And what is done is they team up with the smaller operators. And you have these sort of transient joint ventures over 1 or 2 jobs that are formed. So it's and these tankers, the tanker traders were attributed to the secondary, the larger scale operators. So in essence, they're subcontracting the small operators as kind of satellites to come and fill up that tank and make it more economical. And there are some arguments about that because they're splitting the revenue 50-50, and I think the big operators are getting more out of it, but we're working on that. Yeah, those tankers were procured under the project because we knew so little about the business that we didn't feel it was fair to say, I mean, you guys just profit out for this. You know, it's experimental. Once we clarified what the business model really looks like, then we'll be able to start talking to them about microfinance and financing their own equipment. The study area, it's 140,000. It's one of 7 municipal districts. Maputo total population about 1.2 million, so it's a little more than 10% of the population. In terms of area, you're talking, I don't know off the top of my head, I'm just kind of thinking about it, sort of, you know, perhaps 1 or 2 kilometers each way. It's a pretty dense area. Sorry, can you remind me of your question again?
When you started on your business plan, how did you arrive at your cost? Because you charge a fee $75, which is pretty high, I understand. You have deliberately choose only poor areas.
Yeah, okay. We did a lot of analysis to start with, looking at the, you know, costs and so on. I mean, as I've explained, the way it's worked out, that analysis has now had to change somewhat. That fee was an average fee, and you know, initially we recommended to them that they charge, you know, different amounts for different volumes. What the operators have done almost universally by themselves is to charge on the basis of ability to pay. So if they see a customer with a septic tank who's got a nice house, they have the price. And I think it's great because actually there's you know, some cross-subsidy going in there. You've got some poor, you know, widow whose husband died of AIDS or, you know, whatever. They will drop the price. But they still can't compete with the manual emptiers, and that's something that we need to look into. That we won't be able to do proper business planning until we've really worked out the sort of technical model properly, and had some experience, but I'm hoping by later on, probably towards the end of the year, we'll be able to come to some better, more definitive conclusions.
Thank you, Peter. Maybe we'll, so we're doing a panel discussion in the end, sorry, also we can do some questions, more questions towards the end. We'll go to our next speaker, Habibur Rahman. Habib is my colleague at WUSUP. He's a deputy program engineer at WUSUP Bangladesh, and he has 14 years of experience in the wash sector. He's a graduate from Dewitt University, done an MSc in Civil and Environmental Engineering.
Welcome to my presentations. In the presentations, I will just detail out our learnings from ongoing efforts to scale out the support, scale out of FSM enterprises in Dhaka. In the next slide, I will detail out the points that mentioned in this slide, that is the present situation in Dhaka and the present partnership between DWASA, which is a service providing utility under the Ministry of Local Government Division, and the private sector. So in the Dhaka, actually, the 20% of household and the institutions are currently connected with DWASA's sewage network, and the remaining 80% of total population fully depend on on-site sanitation, where the mostly pit latrines and septic tank are manually emptied by local sweeper, so non-formal service provider, with posing significant health threats, both public and the service provider themselves. Septic tank and pit latrine are connected to stormwater drains and surface water bodies. So, in fact, the DWASA, Dhaka Water Supply and Sewerage Authority, they controls sewer network and the street drains, and where the DCC, Dhaka City Corporation, they are responsible for lane drains and solid waste. So under these circumstances, actually the FSM falls nowhere or in between or somewhere in between. So to fill up the gaps, NGOs especially, they are implemented some FSM intervention and with non-commercial basis, and they are facing to challenge the scale up of safe FSM services in Dhaka. So what's up? Our first support to small scale entrepreneur, actually they are providing support to low income communities or Bhekutet, it's a mechanical emptying pump. So those Bhekutet are not accessible. In that area, the small scale entrepreneur, they are providing emptying service. So pit emptying equipment like the culvert, diaphragm pump and mud pumps were designed and tested, and then the entrepreneurs, they receive the training in pit emptying service, and as well they also get training on the business management, including record keeping. And they invested $1,000 each entrepreneur to procure especially the emptying equipment as well as to operate the business. As of December 2014, 1,067 meter cube slabs, the entrepreneur, smallest entrepreneur emptied, covering 20,440 LIC people. Transfer station, it was just constructed. So the purpose of transfer station is to aggregate and dewater of slabs and partially treatment and temporarily holding the slab. In the transfer station, the major component were headworks, including skins, solid waste storage, and underground holding tank. So our second support is to support the medium scale entrepreneur. Actually, the medium scale entrepreneur will provide emptying service in the areas where Bhekutet is accessible, and they will also provide support to emptying the sludge from transfer station to finally DWASA disposal point. Actually, these entrepreneurs selected through a competitive process, where selection criteria include their business capacity, past experience, and the financial ability, while considering factor to score. They receive training, both technical and management aspect. Under the management aspect, they receive training on financial planning, business development, and accounting as well. On technical aspect, they receive the training how they will operate the Bhekutet and occupational health and safety. Actually, the effective analysis and current efficient services and study and limitation and challenges, all findings were shared with the all relevant stakeholders in Dhaka, and then a partnership model was developed, and hopefully it will be signed at the end of January 2015. So supporting utilities' ability to relate to the private sector. So DWASA, they have received 2 Bhekutet from UNICEF as grant, and they explored the support from external sources and agencies, as they don't have the experience to operate the business at this moment. So as DWASA agreed and interested to lease the contract to the entrepreneurs based on business model developed by WASA, and actually the involvement of entrepreneur in this partnership model opened a new dimension of for scale up of efficient services in Dhaka city. So based on the performance and effective analysis of the developed model, lease loan and service contract model, the performance-based lease contract model has been selected and by the both parties, actually the DWASA and the private entrepreneur, because of it has the low startup cost and higher return and greater flexibility. So it is derived from our experience that the entrepreneur cannot make the business viable unless getting the institutional support. And that's why the responsibility and the tax that identified under the lease contract model was allocated in such way so that the entrepreneur get the proper support from local and the utility and institution. But the entrepreneur will actually look after the regular operation and minor maintenance, and they will receive the demand. And whereas the utility will provide all sort of major maintenance works, mass marketing, and will perform the regulatory role. So the challenge, the FSM, the big challenge is creating and sustaining demand. So to address this issue, so WASAF is now providing the promotional campaign support to both entrepreneurs and DWASA as well. And another big concern is the land scarcity. Dhaka is a densely populated city in the world, and especially for the transfer station and disposal site, so we are facing the problem. So to address this issue, so WASAF with the sectoral actors initiated advocacy with concerned authority. And self-disposal is a challenge if the regulatory and the proper application of the standards is not in place. And to reduce this, WASAF is now supporting DWASA to introduce a monitoring system in DWASA so that they can monitor the system with maintaining a proper database system. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Khalid. Shall we do again questions or two questions? Please. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm Vijender from AIT. My question is about the mass marketing that you've talked about. Whom are you actually targeting? Are you targeting the householders via mass marketing, or are you targeting the entrepreneurs? I mean, just can you clarify on this? Because you also mentioned some advocacy for the government. So can you just identify on the target audience in your mass marketing campaign? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Doria Saiko from Asian Development Bank. Thank you for the presentation. Could you explain a little bit about the financial arrangement? Who's paying what to who? Because entrepreneurs may need to make businesses, so I'm not sure how they are collecting the revenues. Is that directly from the users or from the water utility, things like that? Thank you.
Okay. I can answer these two questions. First question related to the first question. Actually, our target audience is both on the demand side and both the supply side. So, with the demand side, so actually in Dhaka there is no demand at this moment. So we need to promotional activities to create the demand and to make the aware of the people. I mentioned that at this moment the septic tank, latrines, or the pits are connected to storm sewer line and upper water bodies that connect. So we need to aware the people to stop this type of practice, as well as they don't think that they need to empty the sludge, though we have the regulation that every 6 months to 1 year they need to empty the sludge, but they don't do this. So we are doing in demand side to create demand as well as promotion. And in supply side, we are also advocating the local authority and concerned authority to provide the service and to make them accountable towards the proper service. Thank you. And the second question, so So actually, we are supporting the two. Actually, we categorize the Dhaka areas in two parts. One is the low-income areas, and another one is better off areas. In case of low-income areas, there is no wide road, so Vecutech is not accessible in that areas. So our small scale entrepreneur, they are providing e-ticketing service in the low income areas. So they are actually getting fees, just negotiate with the customer before entering and then they get the fees. But in case of medium scale entrepreneur, so they will provide the payback service, not yet started. So just we have finished all the formalities and hope this month at the end of January, the agreement will be signed, and after that will come the business where. So they will also initially collect the fees from entrepreneur, but in future, DWASA are in process to add some charge, but it's not finalized yet.
And I have a question. I didn't really get if the different areas of the cities of the city are they are like a concessionaire, or if the different entrepreneurs they compete among themselves. So I don't know, for example, if the household call directly to the provider, or if they call to the utility and the utility sell the service provider to the area. And also, regarding that question is, since all the providers have a lease contract with the utility for equipment, I guess that most of them has more or less the same costs. So to what extent is there like a price competition about the service providers, or they just have the same tariffs?
Actually, in medium scale entrepreneur, when they will start the business, so WASA, they fixed up the price for the better areas and the low income areas. So accordingly they collect and they will monitor to control the price. So
Our next presentation is from Michael from EWAC. He's a group leader for business innovation at EWAC and holds lectures at the University of Gallen. That's in Switzerland. He's a professor at Karlstad University in Sweden. He's interested in service and business innovation in developing countries.
Okay, thanks for the introduction, and I'm happy to present some of our preliminary work on the question how to actually move from a pilot to a large-scale implementation for solving some of these sanitation issues. And it's a collaborative work with my colleagues from EAWAG, especially from Sandek, so Lars, Linda, and so on, Caroline, Craig, Moritz, and I'm just the one presenting the research, but it's always done between our technical team and our business team. And the questions we are raising is how you actually can move, can scale up, what's the best approach for that. Because what we are facing is this kind of sanitation crisis, and I borrowed these slides from Peter, one of his work. And we see, of course, where the ship goes, with this kind of ship flow diagram, across the different parts of the sanitation chain. And we also know where the ship goes across the different kind of technology we are having on-site, centralized technologies. And what is missing here, of course, is on one aspect is the financial. We got this question, where's the money actually going? Who's paying for what? Is the private sector paying? How much money do we have actually can make out of the resource recovery? This is one thing we have to address. How can we somehow get a financial understanding for that? And then most importantly, how we can change the numbers, how we can change from this 2 to 98% ratio to a different type of ratio, and for that we need this kind of financial information. And that's what we try to do, try to understand how we can actually change the system and how we can scale up different business models for different types or different stages in the sanitation chain. For example, by moving more towards safe emptied, by replacing some of the unsafe emptying, by installing treatment technologies and so on, and by moving from a pilot to a large-scale implementation. Because what you can see, of course, worldwide, there are a lot of pilots going on. And this list is not meant to be exhaustive or somehow select specific projects, but you can see that a lot of pilots are going on in treatment technologies like waste enterprises, Safisana, Janiki, and so on. So different kind of treatment technologies are currently in the pilot stage, tested in specific cities, and hopefully come to scale. Or we also can see some integrated sanitation service provider like Soil, Ixtran, Luvat, or Synergy that cover the whole sanitation chain from operating toilets to the transportation of the feces, fecal sludge or urine, and also some treatment technologies. You can see pilots on emptying in Bangalore going on, DSK in Bangladesh, or toilets produced by IDE and PRAC in Bangladesh on a large scale already. And citywide scale, you have Dumaguete in the Philippines, in Manila, that actually have gone already to scale. So all these kind of projects are going on, and the question is somehow how we can move from a pilot to large-scale implementation. If you think about large-scale or pilot projects, just one example, it's from, I tried to also integrate it in different talks before, so it's not from Bangladesh, Dakar, it's an NGO actually, DSK, offering emptying services on that slide, being relatively successful in year 1 and 2, with increasing the number of emptying services for septic tanks and pit latrines. But what you can see in year 3 and 4, despite the fee structure that more or less is able to cover the costs, it's not able to continue the scaling process. So it's not moving towards an higher impact, it faces what we call later on the scaling paradox. So it means you actually have proven the pilot is successful, you can cover your costs for emptying services with this fee structure, but when it comes to investing into the scaling, you're not able to do that. Because you see that these kind of organizations, of course, they start to exist, so they're very spreading around the world, hopefully survive somehow by getting access to grant money, by financing their scale up and their extension of the business, prove their business model is successful, and then try to take off. And by taking off, you can see somehow it's not continuing. So we call this like a pilot never fails, but also never scales. And to understand why is it not successful, you have to just look into different types of modes, how you can actually achieve scaling. And I heard this morning someone talk about speed and scale, whatever, just be very cautious. It's a very steep growth rate or scaling rate we have seen on the slide. The private sector can never grow more than 6 or 8% per year on average. So the growth rates, if you just look at the private sector movement, will be very, very incremental. Not like this kind of hyper growth you might have here. This is just can explain if you replicate business models and you have more companies doing the same. But what you need for scaling, first of all, you have to improve your business continuously. You have to grow, you have to reinvest into the business, and then hopefully the business models that are successful can be replicated in different cities, in different countries, different regions. What we see in reality, unfortunately, that improve, grow, and replicate are not in place in the sanitation sector. Let's just start with the bottom part of the slide, just improving. And we've seen an interesting cosmetics from Dave, how to improve the UDTs by learning actually from the pilot. Peter also shows some interesting learning in terms of how you actually come from the initial configuration of your sanitation chain to the current one. And we have to get this kind of improvements going on. So it's not about how much money actually you put into every organization, it's about how quickly these organizations are able to learn to improve their businesses, to improve their transportation costs, to improve their costs for the treatment, to improve their costs for toilet productions. So this kind of thing we have to get in place. It's the question how quickly you're scaling, it's the question how quickly you're learning from your failures, from your successes, and then trying to implement this kind of learnings in your organization. The second step is about growth. If you look into the business models, most of them are not in place in order to facilitate growth options or growth opportunities. What you normally favor, for example, for treatment technologies, you don't sell the treatment technology, you try to get paid for the end product that is produced with your treatment technology. In this business model, it means all of the capital investments are on your balance sheet. It means you just take treatment technologies, cost you $10,000. You actually can prove that you can make $3,000 with it every year by selling few pellets or whatever. But first of all, this business model, by selling few pellets, the 10,000 is on your balance sheet. And if you have 10 equipments of these kind of things, per year you have 100,000 on your balance sheet, it's a capital employed, you have an interest rate for the capital employed at 6%, so 6,000 already is reduced from your cash flow. That's the first thing. It's in your balance sheet, you have a depreciation rate, let's say the equipment holds 10 years, it's $10,000 again on your balance sheet, reducing your profits and your income. And most of these organizations most probably don't have the own capital to finance these kind of things. So you go to the private sector to finance it. It means you have a borrowed capital, you pay interest rate for that as well, and you actually have a situation where cash flow is extremely reduced just on the financial arrangements you have in your organization. And with that, you're not able to finance your growth opportunities. What we need to get in place is the way some intermediate finances can play in order to avoid that you have such long amortization periods for your treatment technologies and also for the toilets. It means instead of waiting until you recover your investments, the bank has to move in and say, okay, I buy actually the contract you have with your customer, but I give you the 10,000 directly, and the bank receives the 3,000 per year. It's much more reliable in terms of cash flow, and if you have a higher cash flow, it's easier for you to reinvest actually into your business and to expand your business step by step. And finally, when it comes to replication, you can see, of course, that you can replicate very quickly. That's why Starbucks, McDonald's are all over the world. Because major part of their business is standardized. For the business models we see in the sanitation sector, it's very, very contextual specific. So you have a lot of effort to modify a business model that works maybe in Bangalore, if you go to a different city in India, or if you go to Cambodia, whatever. So you have a lot of modification costs to modify your business model. And you cannot cover these costs by the organization trying to replicate it, or by the organizations trying to implement it. Some external financing has to come in to replicate your business model, or to finance modification costs for your replication of the business model. This is one thing we see in the scaling up process. The second thing we see, actually, that's very counterintuitive to what I normally do in business research. Business models at scale have the tendency to become step by step more simple, less complex. But in the sanitation sector, we can see the complete opposite. The pilot project might be a very simple business model, but when you really reach scale, your business model gets more and more complex. And I was happy to work with Ladema in South Africa, for example, in Durban. What they put in complexity in the second stage, for example, is going to a leasing arrangement for the equipment, by setting up a different kind of incentive structure, not getting paid per empty VIP, but getting paid per cubic meter or ton now reduced. So the complexity of the business model actually increases. If you have a more complex business model, it's more difficult for you to manage it and to learn about these kind of things. But this has to be happening because the sanitation sector is not something that you can actually solve with a very simple business model. And the complexity increases about the value proposition, what we call what value actually you're creating for your customers, about the value capturing, and also about the value creation. This means, just continue, and what you can see, you actually increase complexity across these three dimensions: value proposition, value capture, and value creation. When it comes to the value proposition, normally in the pilot phase, you actually address maybe one specific type of customers. You have one specific type of customer need you actually try to address. Very homogeneous customer group. When it comes to scale, you actually observe you need different types of customers to really diversify your risk. You have to have different types of offering. It might be not a pit-touch stream, you're actually offering the salad drinks, but a shelter, that's actually a value proposition. A part of it, you actually diversify your portfolio very quickly in the scaling process because you have different types of services you want to offer to different types of customers. It's not the initial customer segment you continue to work with. You're spread across different types of customer, covering different types of customer needs, and so on. The same for value capturing. Normally you can see initially a lot of organizations just actually bundle all their grants, their product revenues, their service revenues, or donations into one basket and try to finance all their activities in the pilot phase. If you look more at the scale, you see a more dedicated approach to how you make your financial arrangements. You might set up a small R&D department that still receives some grant money in order to develop your technologies. You might set up another department actually that owns all the toilets, for example, and you can sell this kind of toilet contracts you have with your customers by serving them to a social impact investor that is keen on financing 10,000 people having access to toilets. You might consider the part of the treatment technology, different types of the business. So the financial flow gets very easily very complicated if you scale, because you want to have the right income, the right cost structures to get in place for having this kind of complex business model. And finally, also the value creation, you can see that normally you cannot finance the sales process when it comes to the pilot to larger scale. The pilot, a lot of organizations rely on salespeople, on sales channels. But if you have 800, 8,000, 80,000 toilets, your manufacturing cost decreases, but not your sales costs, unfortunately. The sales costs remain the same, because you still need the same number of people to sell a toilet. You can only reduce it by including your customers being part of your sales process. So try to incentivize your customers to recommend your product and give them credit for that in order to avoid your sales costs being constantly on your profit margins. That's something what you can see. And with this, I hopefully got some lessons learned out of that in order to avoid the scaling paradox. Thanks.
Too much scale for PowerPoint to handle. All right, questions?
Okay, I will speak up. My name is Michael Quinton. We take shit compared to one of these presentations. I would have loved to hear your presentation 6 years ago when we started our exercise, going through upscaling. And yes, every word is true, what you're saying, and we really have to reinvest. But the two main issues what we were looking at is when you produce a new high-quality product from sewage sludge, biosolids, whatever you name it, you need a market. It's easy to produce and put it on the fire, but you need to create a market. And this is a tipping point. If you have no market, if you upscale, all of a sudden transport is a killer. You need to transport the product back to the region where they grow the food, where the demand is for fertilizers. So this is often left out of the equation. And also the second killer is you need to work with individual people and authorities. So it comes back to someone who's got a job somewhere and have to sign your contract. And he's got an income. You got to pay a mortgage, he has family to feed. And you have to consider it make it comfortable for him to believe in what you want to deliver and to sign the contract. So it's persuading and convincing people, agencies, environmental agencies, customers, and finally it was food producers. So we are challenged by selling products to farmers because they say, hey, my milk producer, who takes my grain, they don't accept human waste in the food chain. So as long as we don't have there's no food producer on the sponsor side. As long as they don't sign up, we will have a major issue to get human waste back into the food chain, I believe. So these are the main, when you upscale, these are the things you face, transport, people buying and actually the end user.
Niall Book from Goal. It seems like fantastic work to assess these wide variety of enterprises working on this. I'm just wondering if, across all the contexts you've looked at, if you assess like the differing level of public sector support to the enterprises, like if in certain contexts that if governments are more pro-private sector or more able to offer support to help this scaling up, that you see certain perfect situations where the municipality has a role to support the private sector.
Quick answer to that, it definitely has. Private sector, public authorities need to support this kind of local enterprises or businesses. That's one aspect. But also don't forget, it's kind of entrepreneurship is nothing that we have this always or ever saying. So you also have to understand what kind of entrepreneurial skills you have locally available to develop the local businesses. And then I totally agree on the comment. But there's one thing, if you scale in all these kind of difficult environments, you put a lot of business risks on it. So I think that the sessions, if I can make this kind of statement, may be not the right word. FSM is not a business. FSM can be only a business option in a diversified business portfolio. So if you have people that actually do waste collection, they can also do fecal sludge collection. If you have a waste treatment process, you may be also offering equipment for fecal sludge treatment. But with all the risks that we are facing in the FSM business environment, it might be not viable for business just to put all the eggs in that basket. So we may have a diversified business portfolio where sanitation is one part of it.
Hi, I'm Sharda Prasad. Sorry. I'm Sharda Prasad and I'm a PhD student at UC Berkeley. I'm from India and my research is focused on fecal sludge reuse in agriculture. And I just want to add to the statement made by that gentleman. It is more about, in India, farmers are definitely interested in reusing fecal sludge. But again, there is this new concept of, it's an old concept when it comes to India, but somehow it is not discussed here. The caste system. Again, I have been seeing how different farmers from different castes have been perceiving. My research is not complete, but this is one of the interesting observations I have been making during my field work, that farmers who belong to an upper caste, they don't really want to reuse pickle-led and farmers who come to lower caste, they're very comfortable. And in the same way, it also depends on the bias of the government authority involved in managing these things. So, and usually in India, that they happen to come from upper caste. I'm sorry, I have used these words, upper and lower, but that's the reality in India. And they are biased more towards like, oh, who uses human waste? But that is also a reality. Things get thrown in wastewater in India, and pickle-led reuse is happening at a good level in and around some of the major towns. But I just wanted to point that out. That needs to be considered when you plan these things. Of course, transportation is definitely a killer, and that's why it just gets thrown out wherever it's possible. They just want to unload it. People don't like these business operators. They don't really care, about the nutrient value. But farmers really value it. But maybe towards the end, once my PhD is complete, I might have more answers. But yeah, I just wanted to point that out.
What's that question? Yeah, sorry.
The question is that, like, have you ever accounted for the biases of the government bodies and people who want to reuse these things?
I think it's an idea. You have to have this kind of institutional support to get this business running, also to avoid this kind of bias when it comes to reuse of agriculture.
I'll make a quick comment in questions as well. But there's a lot of talk about agriculture, but my understanding is most of food agriculture is outside the city. In the city, there's a lot of landscaping and stuff like that. So I'm not sure I understand if someone can. The work we're doing in Lusaka, I don't know, it's a question for anyone. When we did our analysis, kind of figure out who would buy the products. Most of the people were landscapers, or the city who does a lot of landscaping. So maybe it's not similar in other areas. I just don't.
I'd like to point out a couple of things. It's very context specific, but I mean, there seems to be some assumption that we use this for fertilizer or soil conditioner, but solid fuel is a very viable option in many circumstances, not in all. But obviously it's a product which has a demand right on your doorstep where you're producing the stuff in a city. And it also has good ecological value because it very often would replace charcoal. Something else occurred to me, but I've forgotten.
Does it work if you can project your voice? Go ahead. Joe says. No voice, okay. Do we have a mic? All right. You can ask a question about part.
Oh, that's better. Yes, my question is directed to the previous speaker who referred to the challenges when it comes to scalability of the businesses. I think specifically the debt burden in terms of the business having to pay that interest. Our question is, but I don't understand why those kind of businesses will use debt as opposed to pure equity injection, because they do seem like a classic venture capital type of businesses. And that should probably, solve the problem in terms of cash flows, and that's the constraint on growth.
But I would be, as the owner of the company, I would be always very careful when it comes to equity positions. So if I really want to have other investors in there or not, so it's really a personal question, do I want to do it step by step, or do I have an equity investor or something coming in? So this kind of decisions have to be taken very carefully. So it's not the amount of money you throw into a company that makes it able to grow, it's the management talent that really helps you to grow. It's not the amount of money that actually matters in terms of investment into a company, it's more the management talent.
Hi, thank you. I'd like to ask my question to everyone, and there's two parts to it. The first is, everybody's been talking about using the informal sector. What if there's no informal sector? And also then moving on to that, how do you plan your work? So in piloting, it's very easy to say we'll work in this village and we'll cover this area and we'll do 40 households over a month. But when you move to scale, how do you manage the workloads? Do you do it on a call down system where a household calls you to come and do the work? Or if you get your contracts, even if you get a contract over a large area, like every 2 years in eThekwini, you're emptying toilets. How do you manage it? Do you start from one side and move across to the other? Oh, sorry, I'm Esther. I work for Oxfam in the Philippines, where there isn't much of an informal sector around pit emptying, which is why I'm asking the question.
Yeah, when it comes to call-out versus a sweeping action, call-outs are very expensive because you can get a call out miles away over here and another call out over here. So it's better to have a program of work where you actually start from one end. We found that we entered 35,000 pitcher trees in 3 years, and we started from one end and we swept through the city, and we finished after 3 years, which means we then go back. In 2 years' time, we start again. This is a 5-year cycle. The next time we'll go back and we do less pitcher trees, so we'll finish it in a 5-year cycle. Yeah, so as far as that goes, it's much better. We never ever had a problem with informal stuff, because wherever you've got pitcher trees, you've got informal people, and generally a lot of people without work, etc., looking for work, and that's why you enter into the informal settlements and use informal people within the formal settlement for your labour, etc., etc. So that's what
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your presentations. My name is Funke Kofi. I work for the International Water Management Institute. I'm based in Ghana. When I was coming for this session, I was actually looking forward to also experiences in the reuse sector. So I want to know, since you talked about FSM business, what about the reuse business? Do you have some experiences that you can share with us? Either as fertilizer, either in agriculture, or in fuel, or whatever, any other sector.
Yeah, in the Tekwini, we've got what we call our depot plant at the moment, which has been running, mentioned on the Hyper slide. Yeah, that does produce a fertilizer, but it's not really a fertilizer, it's more a fertilizer, but it has a lot of nutrient in it, and a fair amount of nutrient in it. And we currently are using it in our community gardens and in our parks and gardens. We haven't gone for resale with the public because there's a lot of legislation that you have to go through. So that's what we have done with that. So it is working. We are upscaling now. We've gone from one plant. Now we're going to be releasing 3 more plants. We'll have 4 plants within the Tekwini. We find it's better to do that way because it's cheaper to transport the pellets after they've been dried, or else you transport the water. So we are using it for community gardens a lot, and we're using it for parks and gardens where and when required.
Any more questions?
Thank you. My name is Divalok. I come from DSK. Just one comment, one live comment, and then one question or observation. Actually, in Dhaka, we have more than 3 million cubic meters of fecal sludge produced every day. And whereas, as our organization is concerned, we are able to manage 5,000 cubic meter of fecal sludge per year. So why market is not responding? And whether I like your presentation, but whether you will agree that there are some other factors like legislations, like people's awareness, like that our environment and our public health is at danger, and people are not realizing those things. So you have maybe deliberately you have not touched those things as a first subjects, but I will appreciate any of your comments or feedbacks to this.
I'm currently involved in a program in Lusaka, and it's very much uppermost in the things that we're discussing there. And I mean, it's everywhere, I think, where I've worked on fecal sludge. It's essential to have, as well as your promotion and commercial interests, also to have some regulation and some enforcement. And it is indeed a huge challenge because that enforcement is usually done by the environmental health authorities. Very often they're much more interested in enforcing regulations in restaurants and in butchers' shops and so on, where they get a nice little commission at the end. Enforcing people to use their septic tank properly is not very individually lucrative, and that can be a big factor in many cases. But we certainly shouldn't give up, and I think it just shows the kind of multifaceted nature of sanitation. You can't just look at the business itself, you have to go beyond there, and certainly I think working with the environmental health authorities is a very important part of doing it. And in where was that? In Sierra Leone, in Freetown, For instance, where they had a municipal fecal sludge management system, they were getting very frustrated by this, and what the guy in charge did was to employ a bunch of sort of proto-sanitary inspectors and dressed them up so they looked more or less the same, and kind of got them to sort of fool people, and when they needed the long arm of the law, these guys were around and then could pull in the actual legitimate health inspectors to kind of issue the fines or whatever. So there's ways of handling it, but I agree it's very important.
Maybe just one, if you look historically how businesses evolve, how sectors evolve, it's always the commercial enterprises are driving legislation. It's not putting legislation in first and then the commercial enterprises start. Historically, you can see actually the opposite. First, commercial interest, then legislation comes in and both co-evolves, but it's the commercial sector driving legislation normally.
Can I add really briefly to that? Really, you were saying is your biggest competition are the surface drains in Dhaka. Those are the ones managing the business. Here in the fecal sludge, mostly all of it. I think Dr. Mujibur Rahman in View once said there's about 35 meters of sludge in the receiving lake. So at the bottom of the lake, which is what it was, about 35 meters of sludge resting in the bottom. So I'll just take one more in the back.
I want to agree that biosolids or sewage sludge or fecal solids are created in cities. They are produced in the rural areas where we grow food. Food is our first fecal solid, and we are just concentrating it in our, transporting it to the cities, concentrating it in our bodies, and then concentrating it in any wastewater treatment plants. We have to take it back. The question, if we look at all the funds that are going into new developing projects, looking at new technologies and maybe to support entrepreneurs, wouldn't it be much smarter to put the money in creating a demand, take the money out to the farmers, actually to create a demand for the product, and leave it to entrepreneurs to find the smartest technology out there to take it to the market? I mean, you won't find Starbucks to create someone demand for coffee in you. They just go where you want to drink coffee. And the same with burgers and all the others. So I think if we would take a bottom-up approach, we would agree that funds to create a demand would solve the problem itself.
It's definitely one approach, and if you see, let's say, like the solar sector, we have these feed-in tariffs creating demand, how Europe is building solar industry. I think it's one of the issues you can also definitely address, trying to create demand for the end products as one of the financial support for scaling of sanitation businesses.
Can I just add to that often reuse, it can be an important source of funds, but it's not going to fund the whole business. So, you've got to look beyond that. You can't do it entirely by pull, you have to do a bit of push as well.